About 8 or 9 years ago, I had a health incident. I remember sitting in my chair in my front room, TV room, and I remember getting up and then all of a sudden feeling something very wrong inside, and I couldn't take a step, so I sat back down, and then in a few moments it went away. And then a few weeks later, a similar incident lasted a little bit longer. I wasn't sure what was going on. But this much I know. Being a typical old bachelor, living by himself, I did what most guys would do in that situation. I ignored it. I kind of figured that it would just go away, whatever it was, because that's what guys usually do. And there, nothing happened for a while, then another incident, and I began to realize something had to be wrong. So I didn't tell anybody, staff, and Lord knows I wouldn't tell my family. I went to a health place, one of those health outreach centers, and they ran some tests. And they didn't see anything in particular, and I thought, well, maybe this is some kind of gout thing. I have suffered from gout. Gout I've had shots and medicines for, so maybe this was gout. So they gave me some gout medicine. But it wasn't gout medicine. Deep down in my soul, I said, there's something with the heart going on, but I wasn't sure what. Well, I continue to have these attacks, and the day came this morning to do a funeral. And I got myself into the sacristy, sat down. I remember the folks from Wuja Calcaterra were here. And a gentleman from Wuja comes in the sacristy. I'm sitting on my chair, and I can't get up to walk the 3 feet to put my vestments on. I said, something's happening here. I'm not going to be able to do this funeral. I can't even walk to put my vestments on. And, well, of course, he was very concerned. He called the office, and Ken, my business manager, came over to get me, and he got on the phone, and God bless Father Quain from St. Michael's. Father Quain came and took care of the funeral. Ken drove me to the hospital. It was South Macomb, then St. John's, and now it has another name on 12 Mile in Hoover. Well, I was there 5 long days, which felt like 5 long months. I don't mind visiting people in the hospital. I hate being there myself. So they ran all kinds of tests. The cardiologist ran a chemical stress test, and they did some tests to see if I had any blockage. I didn't have any blockage, very little blockage. And I passed the chemical stress test, and there was no evidence of a heart attack. So the cardiologist said, well, the only thing I can come up with, Father, is that you're just too big. Now, at that time, I was weighing in at 292 pounds. 6'5", I could carry it pretty good, but I was still too big. And I was very unhappy being in the hospital. And I remember the food they were giving me I didn't particularly care for, and I called the office, and we had these high school kids working at the office at the time, and I said, go to Jimmy John's and get me a double order of those ribs. And they did. And the priest said, we call that pulling the collar. I'll never forget the nurse walking in saying, what did you get those? As I was eating my last rib, and I said, oh, just some nice person brought them. Well, the other doctor in charge of me, Dr. Perzicki, who ended up being my regular doctor, very nice man, devout Catholic. He wanted to keep me in there for yet another day for observation, but I convinced him, being a priest, you pull the collar. I'm fine, let me go home. He says, well, okay, Father, we'll let you go home. Yes, I'm out of here. But I knew I had a road ahead of me. I had to get smaller. That's what the doctor said to do, and that's what I need to do. I also had to completely change my way of lifting. I was into lifting very heavy weights. There was a time I could put on 1,000 pounds on the leg press machine and do 20 reps. I'll never forget I did that front of my nephew Luke, and he was amazed. He said, "My God, you are strong for an old man." Yeah, thanks, nephew. I'm an old man. But the doctor told me that that's great for building up muscles, but at your age with your heart, not too smart. Drop those weights a lot and drop the weight, period, on yourself. So I didn't want to go on a diet. I've been on diets before and was successful. Problem is, once you get off the diet, go back to what you're doing, whale comes back. I didn't want that to happen. I knew that was not healthy. That's how a lot of people become diabetic. So I didn't want to go through that seesaw thing. And there in the New York Times was a magnificent article about the evils of sugar. It said that, it started out with a story about President Eisenhower. And President Eisenhower was doing an interview on television in the 1950s, and he reached out and put some saccharin in his coffee. Remember saccharin? You gotta be old to remember saccharin. It was the first artificial sweetener. And the person interviewing the president said, "Mr. President, saccharin in your coffee?" He goes, "Yes, my doctor told me I was getting too heavy and that it's sugar that causes the weight gain. So if I cut out the sugar, I'll be fine." Well, this, of course, the sugar industry went apoplectic. If the president is saying this, people are going to cut back on their sugar, so they do something about it, and something about it they did. If you recall, the tobacco industry for years and years had this phony baloney institute to tell people that tobacco wasn't all that harmful for you and that the filters that they had was more than sufficient. Well, the sugar industry did the same thing. They funded a lot of universities and kinesiology departments. I know a young man who went through that department at the University of Michigan, and he was telling me, "Well, you know, sugar's not that bad. It's that saturated fat you got to worry about." Remember the old fat gram thing, count your fat grams? Well, the evidence is now crystal clear. It's the sugar. It's the sugar. You cut out the sugar, you're going to get thinner. I cut out the sugar. I would buy low sugar varieties if there was a choice. You know, you can get peanut butter with 8 grams of sugar in a serving. You get peanut butter with 1 gram of serving. Take the 1. You cut out sugar, you get some decent supplements when you're baking, and guess what? I'm now at 235. I wouldn't call it a diet. I would have called it a change of lifestyle. That's important, a change of lifestyle. Because what is true about the body, that in order to get healthy, we have to change our whole style of living. Don't say, "I'm going to do an exercise program." Say, "Exercise is now part of my life." Never say, "I'm going on a diet." Say, "I'm changing the way I'm going to eat for the rest of my life." Long-term gains can be had. Well, what's true with the body is true with the soul. You have to eliminate the things that are bad. Just like you would eliminate sugar for your body, you have to cut down on sin for the soul. You have to be very conscious of little things. And just like, you know, you look at how sugar can come in, you know, it doesn't, you don't sit down and eat a bowl of sugar. It's a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there throughout the day, and it adds up. Well, it's the same true with sin. Most of us don't go out, you know, and commit, you know, a horrible mortal sin right off the bat. We do little things, itty-bitty little, a little lie here, a little gossip there, a little tiny petty theft here, and next thing you know, it's all adding up, and it's corroding the soul. So that lesson can be applied to our soul, the health of our soul. And it's important to be ever vigilant about sin, just like you'd be vigilant about your diet. And secondly, it's important to eat good things for our body. It's just as important to receive good things for our soul. And there's nothing better than receiving the Lord himself. The Lord gives himself to us every time we receive the Eucharist. And there's nothing better for our soul than receiving the Lord.